He tossed a $50,000 check across the table like he was tipping a valet. He told her she was simple. He told her she would be happier being nobody again. He did not even let her finish her sentence. If he had, he would have learned that the woman he just threw away was fighting stage 2 cancer. But Vivian Cole did not scream. She did not cry. She did not beg. She picked up that pen and signed her name in silence. Then she walked out into the rain with nothing. No money. No home. No insurance. No treatment plan. Just a diagnosis folded in her coat pocket and a rage so quiet it could burn a city down. 48 hours later, Marcus Cole woke up to 47 missed calls. He grabbed his phone, clicked the first link, and his blood went cold. There, on a grainy paparazzi video, was the woman he had just discarded, walking up the steps of a $70 million private jet. And the man waiting for her at the top of those stairs was a ghost. A billionaire who had not been seen in public for a decade. Marcus did not know it yet. But he had not just signed a divorce decree. He had signed his own destruction. This story is proof that silence is not weakness. It is a weapon. And the people who try to bury you always forget one thing: they are just planting seeds. If you have ever been told you are a burden, stay with me to the very end. This one is going to change how you see yourself. Now, before we go any further, if stories like this hit you right in the heart, tap that subscribe button and that little bell right next to it. It takes 1 second. It costs nothing. And it makes sure you never miss a story that might be exactly what you need on a hard day. If this one moves you, drop a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. Let us begin. The conference room at Whitmore and Associates smelled like leather and betrayal. That is not a metaphor. The chairs were Italian calfskin, the kind that cost more than a used car. And the betrayal was sitting at the head of the mahogany table in a bespoke navy suit from Savile Row, checking his Rolex for the 3rd time in 60 seconds. Marcus Cole looked like a man who had already won. 45 years old. Handsome in the way that expensive grooming and pure arrogance can make any man handsome. He radiated the kind of confidence that comes from never once being told no by anyone who mattered. Next to him sat his attorney, a sharp-faced man named Gerald Staton, who shuffled a stack of documents with the aggressive precision of a casino dealer who had never once lost. Gerald charged $800 an hour. He was worth every penny if you were the one paying him. If you were on the other side of the table, he was a nightmare in a 3-piece suit. And on the other side of the table sat Vivian. She looked small. That was the first thing anyone would notice. She sat in the oversized leather chair like a child at the adults' table for the first time. She wore a simple cream-colored blazer that was slightly too big for her frame, because she had lost 14 pounds in the past 4 months. Her dark hair was pulled back. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. But here is what nobody in that room knew. Not Marcus. Not Gerald. Not the receptionist who had offered her water with pity in her eyes. Nobody knew that Vivian Cole had been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer 11 weeks ago. She had found out on a Tuesday afternoon in an oncologist's office on the 7th floor of Seattle's Swedish Medical Center. She had driven herself there. She had driven herself home. She had sat in the parking garage for 40 minutes before she trusted her hands enough to steer. She had tried to tell Marcus 3 times since then. Each time, he had been too busy, too distracted, too wrapped up in Jade and her social media posts and her baby voice that called him daddy without a shred of irony. Vivian had swallowed the words each time like bitter medicine. And she had told herself she would find the right moment. This was not the right moment. But it was the last one. Vivian Cole was not born into money. She was born into ambition, which is harder and more durable. She grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the daughter of a retired schoolteacher named Ruth and a man who worked the 3rd shift at a bottling plant and came home smelling like machine oil and sacrifice. They were not poor, not exactly. But every dollar was accounted for, and every luxury was the result of someone going without something else. Vivian learned to work before she learned to rest. She graduated with honors from the University of Washington, turned down 3 corporate offers because she wanted to work somewhere that mattered, and landed a junior analyst position at a venture capital firm called Roth Capital, run by a man named Alexander Roth, who was equal parts brilliant and terrifying. She was good at the work. She was extraordinary, actually. She could read a balance sheet the way a musician reads sheet music, not just the notes, but the feeling underneath them. She could find the one number in a 1,000-line spreadsheet that did not belong, the anomaly that everyone else had walked past. Then she met Marcus Cole at a charity gala when she was 26 years old. He was charming and handsome, and he told her she was the smartest person he had ever met and that he could not build his company without her. She believed him. Because she loved him. And because she did not yet understand that Marcus Cole was the kind of man who consumed people the way fire consumes oxygen, completely and without gratitude. She left Roth Capital. She married Marcus. She poured 10 years of her life into building Preston Dynamics, writing business plans, crafting pitch decks, staying up until 3 in the morning reworking financial projections while Marcus slept and took credit. She was his invisible co-founder. His unpaid chief strategy officer. His ghost. And then, 8 months ago, the diagnosis. Stage 2 breast cancer. Treatable. But the treatment, chemotherapy, radiation, a possible surgical intervention, would cost somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 after insurance. Vivian's insurance was through Marcus's company. The policy was solid. The coverage was real. What Vivian did not know was that Marcus had already decided to file for divorce. She found out the same week she got the diagnosis. Not from him. From Jade's Instagram, which Vivian had been looking at the way you look at a car accident, unable to stop, unable to explain why. Marcus had taken Jade to Cabo. Vivian was in an oncologist's office being told that her body was trying to kill her. She tried to reach him that night. He did not answer. She tried the next morning. He texted back, "We'll talk when I'm back." He came back on a Thursday. He handed her a folder of divorce papers on a Friday. And 2 weeks later, here they were, in a conference room that smelled like leather and betrayal, with Gerald Staton shuffling his stack of documents and Marcus checking his Rolex. Gerald cleared his throat. "Let us review the terms one final time." His voice dripped with the kind of sympathy that was about as genuine as a $3 bill. "Mr. Cole retains the property on Mercer Island, the primary residence in Bellevue, and full ownership of Cole Dynamics. As per the prenuptial agreement, which we have successfully upheld, Mrs. Cole is entitled to a lump sum of $50,000. $50,000. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building his company from the ground up. 10 years of writing business plans and crafting pitch decks and staying up until 3 in the morning, and her payout was $50,000. That was $5,000 a year. Less than minimum wage. In exchange, Gerald continued, you waive all rights to future alimony, spousal support, and any claims on Mr. Cole's future earnings." He slid a pen across the polished table. It spun like a compass needle and stopped pointing directly at Vivian. "It is a clean break, Vivian," Marcus said. His voice was smooth and polished. Not one trace of the man who had once promised to love her in sickness and in health. "Honestly, it is generous given the circumstances." The circumstances were currently sitting in Marcus's car in the parking garage downstairs. Her name was Jade Monroe. She was 24 years old, had 160,000 Instagram followers, and a talent for spending Marcus's money with the enthusiasm of a child in a candy store on her parents' credit card. She called herself an influencer. The only thing she influenced was Marcus's bank account, always in the downward direction. Vivian did not look up from the document. The words blurred. Irrevocable breakdown of marriage. Waiver of rights. Total separation. She fought. She had to try. "I wrote the business plan that landed your first $10 million contract, Marcus," she said. Her voice was steady, stronger than she expected. "I built the pitch deck for Series B. I worked 80-hour weeks for your company. You paid me nothing. Not a salary. Not equity. Not even a thank you." Gerald cut her off with surgical precision. "The prenuptial agreement is clear, Mrs. Cole. Contributions of a domestic nature do not constitute grounds for." "I was not domestic," Vivian said. The sharpness in her voice made both men blink. "I was your unpaid chief strategy officer." The room went quiet. Marcus leaned forward. His cologne, the same Tom Ford he had worn for 10 years, reached her across the table. It used to make her feel safe when he held her. Now it just smelled like expensive lies. "Sign the papers, Vivian. Do not embarrass yourself." She took a breath. This was it. The last moment. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." He cut her off like she was a telemarketer interrupting his dinner. You have nothing left to say that I want to hear. Sign it. She closed her mouth. She looked down at her hands, the hands that had spent 10 years building something with him. Marcus. She tried once more. I have cancer. The room did not shift. No gasp. No sharp intake of breath. Gerald's pen kept moving. Marcus's expression did not change. His jaw tightened, but not with grief. With irritation. I know, he said quietly. Vivian stared at him. You know. Gerald told me. The hospital records came up in the financial review. The insurance claims. His voice was flat. Measured. The voice of a man who had already processed this information and arrived at a conclusion. It changes nothing. She could not speak for a moment. He had known for weeks. He had known, and he had said nothing, and he had scheduled this meeting anyway. Marcus. My treatment costs. Your treatment is your problem. You are a liability, Vivian. I will not pay for it. Sign the papers and the insurance cancellation takes effect immediately. Or fight me in court and spend whatever you have left on attorneys instead of doctors. He straightened his cuffs. Either way, it is your choice. She looked at him for a long moment. She picked up the pen. Her hand did not tremble. That was the first odd thing, though Marcus was too arrogant to notice. A woman losing her marriage, her insurance, and her treatment plan usually shook. She usually cried. She usually begged. But Vivian was silent. She pressed the pen to the paper. The scratch of the nib was the loudest sound in the room. She signed her name. Vivian Cole. She dropped his last name with the stroke of a pen. She pushed the papers back across the table. Done, she said softly. Marcus snatched them up. Satisfied, he stood and buttoned his jacket with the casual ease of a man closing a deal on a used car he had massively underpaid for. Well. That was easier than I thought. He pulled the check from Gerald's folder and tossed it onto the table like he was tipping a gas station attendant. $50,000. Take care of yourself, Viv. You were never cut out for this world, the galas, the pressure, the pace. You are a simple girl. You will be happier being simple again. He paused. Then, almost as an afterthought, I hope you find good doctors. He said it the way you say, good luck, to someone you will never think about again. He turned his back on her to shake Gerald's hand. Vivian stood. She looked at the check on the table. $50,000. The price tag Marcus Preston had put on a decade of her life, and a cancer diagnosis. She did not touch it. Marcus. He paused. Looking back over his shoulder with the expression of a man who had already mentally left the room. What? Keep it. You are going to need it more than I will. Marcus laughed. A barking, cruel sound. I am worth $40 million, Vivian. I think I will be fine. Goodbye, Marcus. She walked past him. Past Gerald and his stack of papers. Past the receptionist who looked at her with pity so thick you could spread it on toast. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the lobby button. As the doors closed, she heard Marcus say to Gerald, pride. She will be back begging for that check when the hospital bills hit. Put it in escrow. The elevator descended. Vivian was alone. She leaned her head against the cold metal wall. He knew, she whispered to the silence. He knew and he walked away anyway. The doors opened. She walked out into the pouring Seattle rain. She did not open an umbrella, she did not own one. She let the water soak into her blazer, washing away the scent of Tom Ford cologne that clung to her like a ghost. She walked 3 blocks to the bus stop and sat on the cold metal bench and waited for the number 57 to Tacoma. Vivian Cole walked out of that building with nothing. No money. No home. No health insurance. No treatment plan. But she was carrying 2 things Marcus Cole did not know about. One was the diagnosis. The other was a rage so quiet it could burn a city down. And what happened next would change everything. But that part of the story starts in a free clinic and ends on a billionaire's jet. Stay with me. The studio apartment in Tacoma was the kind of place that made you wonder if the landlord had ever actually seen it himself. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor's television and his arguments with his girlfriend. The carpet had evolved through years of neglect into a color that could only be described as existential despair. There was a mattress on the floor, a coffee maker that worked half the time, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot of a tire shop. Rent was $8.50 a month. That would eat through her savings faster than she wanted to think about, especially since she had not actually taken the $50,000. She had walked away from it. Pride is a luxury when you are sick and alone. But Vivian's pride was the only thing she still owned that Marcus had not managed to take, and she was not about to surrender it for a check that represented everything she despised about how he valued her. So she had nothing. Truly nothing. She pawned her engagement ring on the second day. She walked into a pawn shop on Pacific Avenue, a place with bars on the windows and a man behind the counter who had seen every form of human desperation and was no longer impressed by any of it. He examined the ring and said, $3,200. Vivian blinked. Marcus told me it was worth $40,000. The pawnbroker looked at her with an expression that was not quite pity but lived in the same neighborhood. Ma'am, this is cubic zirconia in a gold-plated setting. It is a nice fake. But it is a fake. A fake ring. For 10 years, Vivian had worn a fake engagement ring and believed it was real because the man who gave it to her told her it was. She stared at the pawn shop receipt for $3,200 and laughed. The kind of laugh that lives next door to crying. Without insurance, her cancer treatment was not just expensive. It was inaccessible. The first oncologist she called quoted her $42,000 for the first phase of chemotherapy alone. The second was slightly less. The third recommended she apply for Medicaid, a process that would take 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. She did not have 6 to 8 weeks to waste on paperwork. She applied for jobs. 16 applications in the first week. A decade of experience running strategy for a company now worth $40 million. On paper, she should have been snapped up immediately. The rejections came in waves. We appreciate your interest but are looking for candidates with more recent experience. Unfortunately, you are overqualified for this role. Overqualified. Corporate Code 4, too old, too long away, we do not know what to do with you. She was 38 years old with a 10-year gap on her resume that read homemaker but should have read unpaid executive who built a $40 million company for a man who repaid her with a fake ring and a real girlfriend. The fatigue hit in week 3. Not just the emotional kind, the physical kind that arrived without warning and dropped her to the couch like a stone. Her oncologist at the free community clinic, a compassionate woman named Dr. Reyes, told her that the cancer, untreated, would continue to spread. The window for the most effective treatment was closing. You need to start within 30 days, Dr. Reyes said. Waiting longer changes the prognosis significantly. 30 days. Vivian sat with that number on the bus on the way home. 30 days to find money she did not have, for treatment she could not afford, with insurance that had been cancelled the same day she signed her name on those papers. That was Gerald Statton's clean break. Clean for Marcus. For Vivian, it was like being pushed out of a plane without a parachute and being told to enjoy the view. The worst night came on a Tuesday. Vivian was sitting in a laundromat at 11 o'clock, watching her only 3 outfits spin in the dryer. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting everything in harsh blue-white glow that made the room feel like a hospital waiting area for people whose lives had flatlined. She checked her phone. Marcus's latest Instagram post loaded slowly over the laundromat's terrible Wi-Fi. A close-up of Jade at dinner, laughing, head thrown back, wearing a diamond necklace that caught the candlelight and scattered it like tiny explosions. 1 heart emoji. That necklace cost more than everything Vivian owned. She put the phone face down and called her mother. Ruth answered on the second ring. She always answered on the second ring. First ring was too eager. Third was too slow. Ruth Caldwell was a retired schoolteacher and she approached even phone etiquette with pedagogical precision. How are you, honey? How is Marcus? The lie came out smooth and practiced. Vivian had been lying to her mother for weeks. Everything is fine, Mom. Just the move settling in. You sound tired, sweetheart. I'm okay. How is your treatment? Ruth hesitated. That tiny pause was louder than any words. Ruth had been managing the tail end of her own health scare, a cardiac scare from 6 months ago that had required a procedure and left her with ongoing monitoring costs. She was on a fixed teacher's pension. The bills were eating her alive. But Ruth would rather fall apart than burden her daughter. "We can talk about that later," Ruth said, which in Ruth language meant, "The bills are crushing me, but I will die before I tell you." After she hung up, Vivian sat in a plastic chair and stared at her reflection in the laundromat window. The rain streaked down the glass, distorting her face into something she barely recognized. She looked old. Not 38. Old in the way exhaustion and fear age a person in weeks rather than years. Her hand rested on the spot where she knew the mass was. Small. Treatable, for now. A clock, ticking. "I am going to figure this out," she whispered. "I just do not know how yet." If this story has your heart right now, type, "I'm with you, Vivian," in the comments. Let us see who is truly following until the end. Something else happened in those early weeks. Something quiet. Like a seed cracking open underground where nobody can see it. Vivian started to work. Not a job, nobody would hire her. But she had a laptop, a taped-together relic with a cracked hinge and a battery that lasted 45 minutes. And she had a brain that had been dormant for a decade and was now waking up furious. She put up a listing on a freelance site. Business strategy consultant. Financial modeling. Pitch deck development. 10 years of experience. She priced herself low because she could not afford to be proud about her hourly rate when she was choosing between medication and electricity. Her first client was a woman named Georgia who ran a small bakery out of her kitchen and needed help writing a business plan for a bank loan. Vivian wrote it in 2 days. It was immaculate. Georgia got the loan. She left a 5-star review that said, "I do not know where this woman has been hiding. But she is a genius." The second client came 3 days later. Then a third. Within a month, she had 4 regular clients. Small startups. Modest fees. She was not getting rich. She was getting by. And getting by, when you have been drowning, feels like flying. But she still needed treatment. And the clock was still ticking. She went to the Southside Community Health Center on a Thursday. She applied for their oncology assistance program. She filled out every form, sat through every intake, and waited. And on a gray Tuesday afternoon, a social worker named Patricia called and told her, "You qualify. We can start your first round of chemotherapy in 2 weeks." Vivian sat in her apartment and pressed the phone to her chest and breathed for the first time in months. 2 weeks later, she walked into the infusion center. She sat in the reclining chair. The nurse, a steady-handed woman named Carol, inserted the 4 with calm competence. Vivian looked at the clear bag of medication hanging above her. $80,000 of treatment she could not have afforded. The system, for all its failures, had found a crack through which she could slip. She was sick. She was broke. She was alone. But she was being treated. She was fighting. And while she fought, she kept working. She kept building. And one day, while running a search on Preston Dynamics for a client comparison brief, she noticed something in the numbers. Something that did not add up. She leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed. The machine woke up. Vivian had spent 10 years inside Cold Dynamics. She had written the reports. She had built the models. She had designed the very financial architecture that Marcus now used to hide his crimes. Because that is what they were. Crimes. She called her old friend from the University of Washington, a forensic accountant named Daniel Webb. They had been study partners in their junior year, pulling all-nighters fueled by bad coffee and mutual ambition. Daniel had passed his CPA exam because Vivian tutored him every night for 3 months. He had told her 100 times that he owed her everything. "Daniel," she said. "I need a favor." He pulled the numbers. What he found made his hands shake. Cold Dynamics was a house of cards. Marcus had been hiding losses in a shell company called Meridian Solutions, no employees, no office, no revenue, just a bucket where he dumped bad numbers so they would not appear on quarterly reports. He had taken a second mortgage on the Mercer Island property, a company asset, as personal collateral. The money had gone to a jewelry store. $200,000 for a diamond necklace. Jade's necklace. The one from Instagram. The one that sparkled like tiny explosions in the candlelight. Pension fund money. He had used pension fund money to buy his girlfriend jewelry while his ex-wife sat in a free clinic fighting cancer without insurance. If this comes out, Daniel said, it is not just embarrassing. Securities fraud. Embezzlement. Wire fraud if any of it crossed state lines, which it did. Vivian sat in the silence of her apartment. The 4 bruise on the inside of her arm was still faintly visible from last week's treatment session. She was holding a bomb. The question was what to do with it. The answer came slowly, like a tide. She did not want revenge for the sake of destruction. She wanted 3 things. Real health insurance so she could complete her treatment properly. Her mother's cardiac monitoring costs covered. And a formal record, in writing, that Marcus Cole had abandoned his wife during a cancer diagnosis to cover himself legally. 3 completely reasonable things that any decent man would have offered voluntarily. But Marcus was not a decent man. So Vivian would have to negotiate. She drafted a letter. She addressed it to Gerald Staton. She laid out what she knew without revealing how she knew it. She offered a deal, comprehensive health insurance reinstated retroactively, her mother's cardiac monitoring covered, a written statement acknowledging the circumstances of the divorce. In exchange, silence. No SEC complaint. No press. No exposure. She sent it. Then she did something she had not done in months. She bought a small yellow succulent from the dollar section of a grocery store and put it on the windowsill. Something alive. Something that needed very little to survive. "We are going to be okay," she whispered to the plant. "He will see the logic." Everyone walks away quietly. Everyone is fine. She fell asleep with her hand on her chest, feeling her own heartbeat, strong, steady, stubborn as a weed growing through concrete. She should not have slept so well. Because she had just poked a rattlesnake. And rattlesnakes do not negotiate. They strike. Gerald read the letter twice. Then he called Marcus. Marcus was on his yacht when the call came. Jade was sunbathing on the deck. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and a cigar in the other, looking like a man in a cologne advertisement, all surface and no substance. "Your ex-wife knows about the Meridian subsidiary." The scotch glass stopped halfway to Marcus's mouth. Gerald laid it out. The letter. The specific transactions. The forensic accuracy of it. "She is offering a deal," Gerald said. "Insurance reinstated. Her mother's medical costs. A written acknowledgement. It is, frankly, remarkably reasonable. She threatened me. She offered to stay quiet. She has cancer," Marcus said, and his voice carried something dark and calculating in it. "She is dying. She has no leverage. She is playing games." A pause. "Find Carl Whitley." Gerald went very still. He knew that name. Carl Whitley was a private investigator whose methods lived in the gray area between legal and criminal. He did not just find dirt on people. He manufactured it when the real thing was not dirty enough. "James, I strongly advise. Find him today." The attack came 48 hours later. Whitley photographed Vivian at the free oncology clinic, making sure to capture the peeling paint on the building and the weeds growing through the cracked lot. He documented her crying in a supermarket parking lot when her card was declined for a $12 grocery run. He took pictures of her apartment from angles designed to make it look as bleak as possible. He spoke to her landlord. He spoke to the cashier at the corner store. Then Marcus's legal team built their narrative. They hired a psychiatrist named Dr. Leonard Moss, a man who had been disciplined twice by the state medical board and still had his license because men like Dr. Moss always knew the right people. Dr. Moss reviewed Whitley's file and, without ever meeting Vivian, without ever examining or speaking to her, wrote a 12-page psychological evaluation concluding that Vivian Cole suffered from acute delusional disorder with paranoid ideation, and that her cancer claims were likely fabricated or greatly exaggerated as a manipulation tactic. Let that land for a moment. She had cancer. A documented, diagnosed, medically confirmed illness. And Marcus paid a psychiatrist to suggest she was making it up. Marcus's lawyers filed 2 motions simultaneously. The first, a restraining order claiming Vivian was harassing him with fabricated financial allegations. The second, a motion to have her excluded from any financial proceedings on the grounds that she was mentally unfit. They were trying to erase her. The papers were served at the oncology clinic during her second round of chemotherapy. A man in a gray suit walked into the infusion room and handed her a manila envelope while she sat in a recliner with an 4 in her arm. Nurse Carol looked like she wanted to throw him out. She did not. But she stood close to Vivian afterward, close and steady, the way good people do when they cannot fix a thing but refuse to let you face it alone. Vivian opened the envelope with her free hand. She read the first page. Then the second. The room tilted. She folded the papers. She placed them in her bag. She looked at the 4 bag hanging above her. Then she looked at the window. "Okay," she said quietly. Just the one word. But the way she said it was the way a door sounds when it locks from the inside. Daniel Webb. It took Gerald's team less than a day to trace the forensic analysis. The methodology was distinctive, the work of a trained forensic accountant using specific firm databases. They pulled the access logs. They found exactly what they needed. Daniel had used his firm's credentials to access systems he was not strictly authorized to see. Gerald called him personally. "Mr. Webb. We have the timestamps. We know what you downloaded. The penalties for unauthorized access under federal law include up to 5 years imprisonment and fines of $250,000. We also have grounds to file a civil suit against you and your firm." Daniel stared at the photograph on his desk. His wife. His 2 kids. Emma, who had just started kindergarten. Noah, who was 3 and still slept with a stuffed dinosaur. "What do you want?" he whispered. "Sign an affidavit stating that the forensic analysis was produced using falsified data provided by Vivian Cole. That she coerced you into a fraudulent report. That is not true. Truth is a luxury that men with children in kindergarten cannot always afford." Daniel called Vivian at midnight. "Viv." His voice was cracked. She knew the sound. It was the sound of a man who had already made his decision and hated himself for it. They found the database access. "I have 2 kids, Viv. I signed their affidavit this morning. I told them you gave me falsified data. I told them you coerced me. A beat. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. But I have my own family to protect." He was crying. She could hear it. "Daniel. I understand." She did not. But she did not have the energy to hate him. "I understand. Goodbye." She hung up. She sat in the dark apartment. The succulent on the windowsill caught the moonlight. Something alive. Something that needed very little to survive. The dominoes fell fast. Without Daniel's testimony, the SEC investigation stalled. Marcus's lawyers moved next, a $10 million defamation suit against Vivian personally. Then the restraining order hearing was moved up. $10 million. Vivian had $3,800 in her bank account. She was mid-treatment. Her immune system was compromised. Her hair was thinning. And now she had to appear in court to defend herself against the accusation that she was mentally unfit, with her only witness having just testified she was a liar. She sat on the floor of her apartment. She looked at her hands. The 4 bruise. The chemo fatigue sitting in her joints like cement. She thought about calling Marcus. Maybe if she begged. Maybe if she said she was sorry. Maybe surrender was not weakness. Maybe it was survival. Her thumb hovered over his number. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Reyes at the clinic. "Vivian, your labs came back. The tumor markers are responding. The treatment is working. Keep fighting." She stared at the screen. The treatment is working. She set the phone down. She opened the laptop. The battery was at 11%. She plugged it in. The frayed charger glowed orange. And Vivian Cole, tired, sick, frightened, and alone, started typing. Because if her body was still fighting, the rest of her had no business quitting. She wrote for 6 hours straight. She did not need Daniel. She never needed Daniel. What she needed him for was corroboration, a second set of expert eyes. But the analysis had always been hers. She had 10 years of institutional knowledge. She had sat in the room when Marcus made the decisions. She knew where every body was buried because she had dug most of the graves herself. She started from scratch. No proprietary databases. No firm credentials. Nothing that could be challenged on procedural grounds. Only publicly available information, SEC filings, annual reports, quarterly earnings calls available on Cole Dynamics' own investor relations page, county property records, corporate registration documents for Meridian Solutions filed with the state of Delaware and available online for $2. She cross-referenced revenue claims against industry benchmarks. She mapped the cash flow discrepancies quarter by quarter. She found the Mercer Island property transfer in the county recorder database. She traced the $200,000 personal loan routed through a Cayman Islands bank. She exposed Meridian Solutions as nothing more than a bucket for losses labeled as research and development consulting fees. By 4 a.m, she had rebuilt the entire analysis using only public data. Every source verifiable. Every conclusion devastating. By 6, she had written 5,000 words of plain English narrative explaining what the numbers meant. Not in dry accounting language. The kind a journalist could understand. The kind a retiree watching from their living room could read and say out loud, "This man stole from pension funds to buy his girlfriend jewelry while his wife was in a free cancer clinic." She titled it, "The Numbers Do Not Lie, an Open Letter to the Board of Cole Dynamics." She published it on Medium at 6:12 in the morning. Then she closed the laptop and slept. She woke to chaos. Her phone, the cracked, tape-covered thing, was buzzing like a broken alarm clock. She had 17 notifications. 16 more than she usually got in a day. By noon, the article was on the front page of Hacker News. By 3, former Wall Street analysts were independently verifying her numbers on social media and arriving at the same conclusions. By 6 that evening, Bloomberg ran, "Anonymous whistleblower alleges systematic fraud at Cole Dynamics." The numbers are damning. By midnight, it had 2 million views. The comments were a thunderstorm of support. She rebuilt a forensic analysis using only public data, mid-chemo, broke, and being sued. Someone give this woman a medal. "I just ran the cash flow numbers myself." She is right. This company is a ticking bomb. Who is Vivian Cole? Because I want to hire her. Team Vivian trended #1 on social media within an hour. But the most important reader was not online. She was sitting in a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle's Belltown neighborhood, drinking wine and reading the article on her phone with an expression moving from surprise to recognition to cold, calculating fury. Her name was Diana Mercer. Marcus's publicist for 4 years. The woman who had spun his story, protected his image, and crafted the narrative of the amicable divorce so smoothly the internet had barely noticed. 3 months ago, Marcus had stopped paying her. Her January salary was late. February never came. She sent invoices. She sent reminders. She was ignored. Then she found a receipt in his desk drawer while looking for a signed contract. $45,000. An Hermes boutique. A Birkin bag for Jade. He had taken the money that was supposed to pay his publicist and used it to buy his girlfriend a handbag. He had not even bothered to hide the receipt. Diana was not a good person. She was not motivated by justice or moral outrage. She was motivated by the same thing that motivates a wasp when you step on its nest. She created an encrypted email account. She wrote to Vivian, "I was his publicist. He stopped paying me 3 months ago so he could buy his girlfriend a $45,000 handbag with my salary. I have internal communications that prove everything in your article. Emails. Texts. Meeting notes. I will testify. But you have to protect me." She sent it at 2 a.m. Vivian saw it at 6. She wrote back one line, "I will protect you. Because nobody protected us." Vivian had the truth. She had the numbers. She had a witness from inside the enemy camp. But she did not have power. Truth without power is just noise. She sat on her mattress at 3 a.m, laptop open, and scrolled through an old email archive she had not touched in over a decade. An account from before Marcus. Before the marriage. Before the slow erosion of everything she used to be. She found what she was looking for in a folder labeled Roth Capital 2013. Alexander Roth. 12 years ago, Vivian Caldwell was 26 and hungry. She had landed a junior analyst position at Roth Capital, a venture capital firm run by a man who was equal parts brilliant and terrifying. She had pitched him a logistics company in Ohio that everyone else had passed on. The pitch had been immaculate. The return had been 410%. $200 million. After that deal, Roth had offered her a partnership. A corner office. Equity. A seat at the table. She turned it down. Marcus had proposed 3 weeks earlier. Roth had walked her to the elevator on her last day and said one sentence, "You are making a mistake. But if you ever need to think clearly again, call me." She had never called. For 12 years. She dialed now. 3 rings. Then a voice, older, rougher, but unmistakable. "Who is this?" "Alexander. This is Vivian Cole. I have a deal for you." Silence. The Roth silence. 10 seconds. "Vivian." He said her name like he had expected this call eventually. "I read your Medium article. Then you know the numbers are real. I know your analysis is the best piece of forensic work I have seen in a decade. I also know you are mid-treatment for cancer, living in Tacoma, and being sued for $10 million by your ex-husband. I keep up. Then you know I am not calling for charity. If you were calling for charity, I would hang up. What do you have?" She laid it out. Cold. Clean. Precise. Cold Dynamics was leveraged to the breaking point. The European expansion was unfunded. The company debt had been sold to a distressed asset fund at 60 cents on the dollar. If Alexander's firm purchased that debt, they owned the leverage. They could call the loan. Marcus could not pay. A forced restructuring, new management, new board. The company's fundamentals, underneath the fraud, were actually strong. And who would the new management be? Me. A longer silence. "You want to take over your ex-husband's company?" "I want to take over a company I built. He just put his name on it." A pause. Then, "Send me the full analysis." "I already did." "Check your email." She heard the click of keys. Quiet as he opened the document. "I will have my team review this by morning. If the numbers hold, and I suspect they will, because you never were wrong about numbers, I am in." "But Vivian." "Yes. This is not charity. The terms will be aggressive. I would not expect anything less. I need one more thing." "Name it." "I need a ride to Paris. The board meeting is next week." Alexander Roth laughed. It was dry and rare and genuine. The laugh of a man who recognized audacity as a form of intelligence. "I think I can arrange that." Vivian hung up the phone. She sat in the dark. The succulent on the windowsill held its small green shape against the moonlight. "Mama just made a phone call," she whispered. "And everything is about to change. But first, the hearing." Judge Patricia Harmon was 61 years old, appointed with bipartisan support, and had zero tolerance for theatrics or lawyers who substituted volume for substance. She ruled from the bench. She did not deliberate for months. She listened, analyzed, and decided. Marcus arrived with 4 lawyers. They wore matching dark suits and matching expressions of expensive confidence. Vivian arrived with Priya Vasquez, one legal aid attorney earning $52,000 a year, carrying a laptop bag and a flash drive. Vivian was in the middle of her chemotherapy cycle. She wore the black Goodwill blazer over a simple dark dress. A soft headscarf. Her face was thin but her eyes were clear. Priya dismantled Dr. Moss's evaluation in 4 minutes. He had never met Vivian. Never examined her. Never spoken to her. He had written a 12-page diagnosis based on surveillance photographs of a sick woman looking tired, and then, extraordinarily, suggested her cancer was likely fabricated as a manipulation tactic. The petitioner hired a discredited psychiatrist to declare the respondent mentally ill and to suggest her documented medical diagnosis is false, Priya said. "This is not a medical evaluation. It is a character assassination with a letterhead." Judge Harmon struck the evaluation from the record without hesitation. Then Diana Mercer's video deposition played on the courtroom screen. Internal emails. Text messages. Marcus joking with Jade about making the sick wife problem go away. Marcus authorizing the diversion of Diana's salary to purchase a Birkin bag. The courtroom went silent. Marcus's face went from confident to concerned to the particular gray of a man watching his empire crack at its foundations. Then Vivian spoke. She walked to the lectern. She placed her hands on it. "Your Honor. 8 months ago, I sat in a conference room and signed divorce papers in silence. I signed them because my ex-husband would not let me speak. I had something to tell him that day. He cut me off and told me I had nothing left to say that he wanted to hear. She paused. What I wanted to tell him was that I had been diagnosed with stage 2 cancer. He told me I was a liability. He told me he would not pay for my treatment. He cancelled my health insurance effective immediately upon signing. Then he hired an investigator to follow me and paid a psychiatrist to suggest that my cancer was fabricated. She stood straight. I am not unstable, Your Honor. I am sick. I am fighting to stay alive. And I am standing in this courtroom, mid-chemotherapy, defending my right to simply exist, against the man who vowed to love me in sickness and in health. Nobody moved. The court reporter's hands were still. Judge Harmon was quiet for 5 full seconds. Then she spoke. The petition for a restraining order is denied. The motion to exclude the respondent from financial proceedings is denied with prejudice. I am referring Mr. Cole's conduct in this matter, including the fabrication of a psychiatric evaluation, the apparent intimidation of a witness, and what appears to be a coordinated effort to weaponize this court against a woman battling a serious illness, to the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington for criminal investigation. She looked at Marcus. Mr. Cole, I have sat on this bench for 19 years. I have seen ugly divorces. I have seen bitter custody battles. But I have rarely seen a more cynical abuse of this court's processes than what has been presented here today. You should be grateful I am only referring this matter and not issuing direct sanctions. The gavel fell. Vivian Caldwell won. 2 days later. King County International Airport. Private terminal. 9 o'clock in the morning. Vivian arrived in an Uber that cost $14. There on the tarmac was the Bombardier Global 7500, $70 million of aviation engineering in matte gunmetal gray, engines already spooling, stairs already down. Alexander Roth stood at the bottom. He looked her over once. Took in the scarf, the sharp eyes, the jaw set like a woman who had been through fire and refused to smell like smoke. You look like a woman who has been fighting a war, he said. I have been fighting one mid-chemotherapy, broke, and alone for 8 months. I think I can manage a boardroom. He almost smiled. They walked up the stairs. Vivian first. At the top, she turned. The Seattle sun broke through the clouds in one of its rare appearances. And 40 feet away, crouched near the perimeter fence, a freelance paparazzi photographer raised his camera. 30 frames in 8 seconds. A woman in a headscarf boarding a $70 million jet. Alexander Roth, the ghost of Wall Street, unseen in public for a decade, 1 step behind her. Get out. Marcus stood so fast his chair hit the wall. Security. The 2 guards by the door did not move. They do not work for you anymore, Marcus, Vivian said calmly. She pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table and sat down. You were 3 months behind on the security vendor invoices. Phoenix Ventures settled the outstanding balance this morning. They work for the creditor now. Marcus looked at the guards. They looked at the floor. He sat down slowly. Like a man realizing the floor beneath him is not as solid as he thought. Vivian opened her laptop. She presented the facts, the shell company, the hidden losses, the second mortgage used as personal collateral, the pension fund money spent on jewelry while his ex-wife sat in a free clinic mid-chemo. Every number verified. Every dollar traced. I am offering the board a lifeline, Vivian said. Phoenix Ventures will inject $200 million into Cole Dynamics. We stabilize the stock. We save the pensions. We save 3,000 jobs. She looked down the length of the table at the man who had called her a liability. In exchange, he goes. Terminated for cause. No golden parachute. The vote was called. Henry's hand went up first. Then Sarah. Then Elliot Thorne, Marcus's golf buddy, his loyal vote, who said quietly, I have 3 kids in college, Marcus. I cannot afford a bankruptcy. His hand went up. Unanimous. Vivian stood. She walked the length of the table. She stopped beside Marcus. She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled, rained-on check. $50,000. The check he had tossed at her in the conference room 8 months ago. She had kept it. Had carried it through every chemo session, every court date, every sleepless night. Not as a keepsake. As a reminder. She placed it gently in front of him. I told you to keep it. You are going to need it. Your golden parachute is voided. Terminated for cause. Financial malfeasance. You leave with nothing. Marcus stared at the check. $50,000. It was all he had now. Vivian. His voice was small. Please. If Jade leaves you because you are poor, Marcus, she never loved you. And if you believe money is the only reason someone stays, then you never understood me either. She nodded to the guards. As Marcus passed Alexander Roth, the older man simply checked his watch and said nothing. Some silences are louder than words. The doors closed behind him. Vivian let out a breath she had been holding for 10 years. She sat in his chair. She opened her laptop. First item on the agenda, she said. We owe the shareholders an apology for the last 5 years of mismanagement. Let us get to work. Columbus, Ohio. Ruth Caldwell's kitchen. 1 year later. The house had a new roof. Pale gray shingles, clean gutters. It was not the most dramatic symbol of change, but it was the most honest one. Ruth was standing at the stove making scrambled eggs in fuzzy slippers. Her color was good. Her bills were paid. Her heart was being monitored quarterly by a cardiologist who actually called her back. On the kitchen table, in a bouncy seat, sat a small yellow succulent in a terracotta pot. The same one from Vivian's windowsill in Tacoma. Transplanted, thriving, a little taller. Vivian sat at the table, laptop open, reviewing quarterly numbers for Caldwell Strategic Consulting. 14 clients. 2 full-time employees. An office in downtown Columbus, a converted storefront with good light and a coffee maker that worked every single time. Her hair was growing back. Soft curls that surprised her every morning in the mirror. Her phone buzzed. An email from Forbes. They wanted to feature her in the annual 40 Under 40 list. She read it, smiled, and closed the laptop. Marcus Cole was serving 18 months in federal minimum security prison for securities fraud. He received a package one Tuesday afternoon. Inside was a photograph of Vivian at her 6-month post-treatment checkup, smiling at the camera in a sun-bright waiting room. On the back, in her handwriting, no evidence of disease. The treatment worked. I thought you should know. Vivian. He sat on his bunk and held the photo for a long time. Whether what he felt was remorse or just loss, only he knew. Jade Monroe left Marcus 3 days after the Paris meeting. She moved in with a tech founder who dumped her after 4 months. She now sold wellness tea to 6,000 Instagram followers. Nobody paid much attention. Daniel Webb never went to prison. After Marcus's conviction, the threat evaporated. He sent Vivian a 5-page handwritten letter of apology. She read it. She did not respond for 6 months. Then she sent one line, I understand. But trust takes time. They were not friends again. Not yet. Maybe someday. Diana Mercer used her whistleblower settlement to start her own PR firm, specializing in reputation recovery for women leaving toxic situations. Vivian was her first client. They met for coffee once a month. Diana always picked up the check. Consider it back pay, she always said. Alexander Roth earned a 280% return on his investment. He called Vivian once a quarter. Their last conversation ended with him saying the partnership offer still stood. Vivian replied, I appreciate that, Alexander. But I have my own firm now. I'll send you my rate card. He laughed and hung up. Professional respect. Not rescue. Not romance. 2 sharp minds recognizing each other across a conference table. Priya Vasquez was still at legal aid. Still earning $52,000 a year. Still fighting. Vivian sent her firm a check every quarter, anonymous, but Priya knew. She used the first one to hire a second attorney. Vivian picked up the succulent from the table and walked out to the front porch. She sat in the rocking chair next to her mother. Ruth was shelling peas into a bowl. The autumn sun was warm on the new roof. Forbes wants to put me on a list, Vivian said. Ruth did not look up from her peas. That is nice, honey. Hand me that colander. Vivian laughed. She held the succulent close and looked at the street. No penthouse. No Paris gala. No private jet. No billionaire on her arm. Just a woman on a porch in Ohio with her mother and a plant that had survived everything alongside her, and a roof that did not leak anymore. Marcus Cole gave Vivian silence. He thought it was a punishment. He thought silence meant defeat. But Vivian used that silence to think. To plan. To build. And when she finally spoke, the whole world listened. She did not need a billionaire to save her. She needed one to invest in her. There is a difference. One makes you a charity case. The other makes you a CEO. Marcus called her a liability. He forgot one thing. Survivors are the best investment you will ever make. People who try to bury you always forget that they are just planting seeds. If you made it this far, if Vivian's story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or someone you are, or someone you refuse to stop being, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe if you have not already, and hit that bell so you never miss a story. And leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in Vivian's shoes? Would you have taken the 50,000? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have done exactly what she did? I will be reading every single one. And I will see you in the next story. Take care of yourselves. And remember, the people who try to bury you always forget that they are just planting seeds.